Ooh. Hello everyone.
Hey everyone.
Hey.
Seth.
Yeah, hello. How are you guys doing?
Good. Very excited for this one. Daniel's going to be carrying it, so I'm always excited.
Should we do that that icebreaker thing that we do, like that we usually do?
Yeah, so thanks for tuning in, guys. I think we're just going to give it another 2 minutes or so for everyone to trickle in. In the meantime, we're trying to do a bit more of a fluid Q&A sort of structure for this one with a bit more discussion, but we're really curious about, firstly, what do you want to learn from this session? And secondly, how can we help you in terms of, your questions about personal branding, what you can do online, offline, and how you can actually network with people during, these COVID times. So if you want to just, unmute yourselves and ask a question or let us know what you want to get out of this, or type it into the chat, then that'd be great.
Yep, and just a little briefly for the agenda here, we're going to be going through exactly what we just said, the icebreaker, when they're going to describe, just introduce ourselves a little bit for those that haven't met us before, few main concepts we're going to hit, and then the wrap up and Q&A. But once again, back to the icebreaker. So yeah, if anyone can share what they want to learn from the session and how can we help you here, or how can we all help you through the Q&A. Feel free to just unmute and yep.
Hi guys, it's Jade speaking. I thought I'd go first, stop all the awkward silence. I have a question as to how can you, I guess, not create content, but post kind of appropriately on LinkedIn or other social media. I guess LinkedIn's probably everyone's professional preference. When you're maybe a junior solicitor in the area and you're not, how do I say, like partaking in, the big name items of the firm, or the work that you're doing isn't exactly, I guess, notable. What kind of content would you suggest, maybe sharing on LinkedIn, or, any other tips, particularly being, the junior?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. I think
awesome.
We'll go into that.
Let's note that. I think that's a common one that we hear as well.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I still wonder about it sometimes.
Yeah, I still don't know how relevant our content is, but people show up, so it's okay.
Cool.
All right, any other questions or any?
Hey Daniel, it's Toby.
Hey Toby.
Enjoying one of your conversations. Hey Jason.
Hey.
Nice to meet you virtually. My question is more along the lines of Jade's, but also, I guess, a niggling concern at the back of my mind is also, how do you, because I'm going to be blunt, but sometimes some of it seems very superficial that people post online. So how do you kind of make relevant content for either your practice area or your field? Like, I know you can share articles and things like that, but also make comments that don't just seem, like meaningless, because sometimes it is worth it to just be silent on social websites, but also other times, like, if you want to comment on an article, but I feel like maybe it's a bit of imposter syndrome, but I'm a trainee. Am I really in a position to comment? Because then other lawyers are going to comment and they might pick up points that make me look really stupid. So I just don't comment at all. So kind of, how do you find that balance between still producing content and sharing things online, but also not, because you can make yourself also look really bad if you post like things just for the sake of posting it. So how do you find that balance?
Great question. Yeah.
That's fair. Yep. Let's go into that later as well. So, and we might just save the rest for the Q&A because it's about time to start, I reckon. But let me just post the shorthand notes for these questions so we don't forget it right at the end. Yeah,
All
cool.
right, great. Thanks for those questions. So we'll just jump right in, I guess. So just briefly introduce ourselves. So Jason, you want to start this one?
Yeah. Hi, guys. If you haven't gotten to have a chat with me yet, my name's Jason. I'm currently a construction lawyer at Pinsent Masons. Basically, look, I've realized pretty early on that there's a bit of a gap between what we learn in law school and what we actually need in practice. And over the last few years, I've gotten a lot more involved in junior training and recently taking it online to try to bridge some of that gap for people. Because honestly, it's not so much about, this massive unknown or really difficult thing. A lot of it is just being able to anticipate certain things that happen during practice that people don't tell you about until you've made a mistake. So what myself and Daniel are trying to do is just give you that bit of a warning and also tell you the step-by-step things that we would do or we have done in response to mistakes we've made, really. So you don't have to go through that trial and error. So I guess just a really quick about me, I've gone through basically a fair bit of work experience throughout my time in law school and as a lawyer in in-house government, private law firm, any sort of random businesses on the side as well. So my expertise really comes from that trial and error doing the work itself. And Daniel?
Yep. So hi, everyone. For those that haven't met me yet, my name's Daniel. I'm an asset management lawyer at UBS right now. And the whole point of me kind of collaborating with Jason is because I saw that he was pushing out this kind of content training for law students and junior lawyers. And for me, I wasn't, the past few years, I wasn't involved with training so much as content creation. I've always been a fan of writing blogs and whatnot. I think early on when I was doing my LLM, I wrote a securities blog, a securities law blog, and it was, looking back, it was actually very nerdy. And I don't think anyone would actually read it, but for me, it was a great outlet for me to share what I've been learning in class and to connect with those securities lawyers, right? And then later on, I kind of helped found a few nonprofits, specifically Global Lawyers of Canada and Federation of Asian Canadian Lawyers in Calgary. And then eventually wrote for Canadian Lawyer Magazine, and most recently since COVID, creating LinkedIn content. And I guess that's partly why we're all here today, to see, for those that want to create content or those that want to just engage through LinkedIn, through networking. So that's, I guess, what brings me here today, is to share what we've been doing in the past few months and lessons learned and things that you should avoid and things that you should do, basically.
Yeah, and I think right now is a pretty interesting time. Obviously, COVID's not ideal for anyone, but I think one of the silver linings to this is it's really changed up how networking and personal branding is being done, especially for junior lawyers. Just thinking back to how we would traditionally approach networking in a law firm or an in-house environment is literally you would go to a conference or you might go to a client dinner where you don't really know anyone. Everyone's super senior. The partners go up to the people they've been working with for the past 10 years. They all have a chat. You stand on the side, or at least I stood on the side and was just like, yep, yep, drink. But never really got anything meaningful out of it. And now that we're all shifted more online and virtually, it's really kind of even the playing field or given us an opportunity to actually create more meaningful connections than we might have done ordinarily. And especially because everyone's kind of new to this, it creates a real even playing field. So, the partners with 20 years of experience in the law might not actually be as good networking online, which they need to do now, as you would just starting out. So everyone's kind of figuring it out. And I think the core of what we're trying to do with this presentation is just show you that personal branding and networking online during COVID is really an opportunity for you to play to your own strengths and interests instead of letting other people decide that for you and, kind of shifting your career and shaping your career the way that you want it to. It's really just taking control over that path. And also just an opportunity to get really exposed to different perspectives and experiences that you normally wouldn't have. And, Daniel and we're collaborating. He's in Singapore, I'm in Australia. We literally met online and now we're kind of doing this together. But, think back to previously, if my circle would have been pretty much all Sydney lawyers or people that I grew up with and never ever went outside of that circle. So now, having that opportunity to connect with people at different levels, in different industries, internationally, is just super, super cool. And that's part of, well, I guess a big part of what we're trying to show you, step by step, how we've kind of done it. It might not be perfect for everyone, but at least it's a starting point for you to, go out, see if it's working for you, and then tweak your approach accordingly. So I hope that's what we give you at the end of this. And again, this is kind of an experimental thing for us. It's our third webinar in total. So we're always looking for your feedback. If we're hitting the mark, if we're not hitting the mark, what's effective, what's not, feel free to reach out and let us know. We always appreciate it. So I guess with that in mind, I just wanted to, throw back to Daniel, right? Like, because we've kind of experienced this just communicating online. But if we want to kind of define what we're actually doing, right, it falls under two categories: networking and personal branding. And like, Daniel, what do you think are really the differences between these two distinct concepts?
Yeah, so I think we can kind of broadly talk about networking as multiple touch points in someone's life. I think it's a term that we overuse. Everyone says, oh, you need to network more, you need to network. It's more than just going for coffees. I think that networking could involve you liking someone's post, or sending them an email, or you could still go for coffees. But the point is that you're engaging with someone on multiple fronts, and that all counts as networking. It doesn't have to be going to a firm event, right? Actually, the firm events are the worst kind of networking, because you really don't know who you're talking to, and sometimes you're paired up with a partner, right? But what do you talk to about with a partner? It's hard, because you talk about your kids. Well, I got none, so right? It's kind of hard. Whereas with here, the benefit of doing online networking is that you can decide who you network with, and you can right away do that kind of background checking on what interests they have as well. It becomes much easier, right? So what is networking not? That's, once again, not business cards scattergunning. That's not the tactic here. Right. I think initially for me, as a trainee, going to firm events, that's what I did. I grabbed a stack of business cards and I would go around the room like, okay, today I got to get rid of 20 cards, right? That's going to be great networking for me, right? I go back to my office, I have 20 cards, but then none of these people remember me, right? They just know that they have a card. That's not really networking, right? And I think that we do a lot of that because that's what we've been taught, right? In terms of personal branding, what is personal branding? So I think for us, we feel that personal branding is sharing your personal story and your unique insights, and basically talking about your why. Why are you doing something? Why are you in law? Why are you practicing construction law, right? These are personal to you. So it's about expressing that and telling that story to others. What it is not is self-promotion. So self-promotion, I think you guys all see it sometimes on LinkedIn. I call it humble bragging, right? It's often people sharing their strengths and achievements with the end goal of just receiving recognition and praise. Now, personal branding goes a little bit further, where you're sharing your successes, but also your failures, right? With the end goal of enriching the reader with an idea or a lesson learned, essentially call to action. And what we kind of like to talk about is that this is your value add. This is how you, your value proposition to others and your readers, right? So I think the difference between the strategies is that personal branding, you're benefiting both yourself and the reader, whereas self-promotion, you're only benefiting yourself. Person reading isn't really getting much out of it. Jason, have you anything to add here?
Yeah, I guess, I think what's important is we don't put this sort of stuff on a pedestal. Like, it's a lot of people, and especially me, right? For like the longest time, I literally thought, personal branding is a massive commitment. I have to get the message perfectly right. I have to do all this research, blah, 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 before I can even start doing this sort of stuff. But really, it's super fluid. You can just start doing small things, whether it's commenting your thoughts on a post, or reaching out to a person that, trying to sell yourself as someone who knows about a certain area of law or whatever. And I just really want to emphasize that it is super fluid, because over the past few years, I went from someone who was trying to rent out graduation gowns online to, you know, doing e-commerce to now training young lawyers, right? Which is, these are all my interests, but it just depends on how you want to sell yourself at a certain point in time and who your audience really is. So yeah, the best way to do it is really just to get started. It's not a massive hurdle, guys. Just get onto it. The first step is always the hardest, but it is super easy after that.
Yep, exactly. And to Jason's point, to just getting started, right? Even taking the time to understanding yourself and your kind of origin story. Where did you come from? What achievements, you know, these are kind of basic interview questions that you would answer, but it'd be good for you to answer for yourself so you can actually start up building a picture of who you are and what you're trying to share with everyone else. So, you know, what adversities have you gone through? What makes you unique outside the law? Do you like to cook? Do you like to, I don't know, like walk dogs? I don't know, whatever it is that makes you unique, right? These things may not help, you know, like contribute to your brand, but it may help you think about what your brand is.
Yeah, and I guess just, you know, in very simple terms, for this presentation, the networking side, we want to help you target people that you want to connect with and step by step figure out how to actually reach out to them and establish a connection. And on the personal branding side, it's more, how do you set yourself up so that when people Google you or look you up online, they're exposed to a certain side of you that you want to sell, that you want them to think about you, whether that's through creating content or through whatever else you want to do. Just that's the sort of inbound leads that we're trying to establish here.
Right. And Jason, I think the whole point of also this is that eventually you want to build yourself to be an authority, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether in a specific area of law or a specific industry, whatever it is, and also building your niche, right? Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, look, I think it's really interesting. So there's the part of this which is, you know, you're doing this for the people outside your immediate circle, outside of your work, right? If they Google you, what will they see? But on the other side of personal branding, and what I've found more interesting in terms of taking control over my career and playing to my strengths and doing what I want to do, is really finding a little niche for yourself within your team to, you know, build upon. So what I mean by this is you really just firstly find something that is important to your team, whether that's in relation to legislation, you know, client information, legal tech, whatever it is, something that you're interested in, something that they need, and then just starting to deliver helpful information in that niche that saves people, even at a basic level, just saves them time from looking things up themselves, right? And I guess the main areas as examples that I want to throw out there is, you know, firstly, for legislation, it's a super basic thing that junior lawyers can actually establish themselves in. So for example, my work in construction law, I used to do a lot of work with the Home Building Act. And we as a team used to refer to that all the time. But I took on that responsibility of saying, okay, look, anytime there's an update to this legislation, or if there's a notable case to this, I'm going to circulate a little flyer, or I'm going to circulate a little email just saying, hey, by the way, there's some changes. This is a quick dot point summary of what they are. Happy to discuss or happy to do more research if you want more help with that, right? And even just taking that initiative and taking those small steps for the legislation side of things, anytime there was a matter that they didn't quite know the new position on, they would come back to me and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or can you look into this a bit more? And from that point on, I became the go-to person for that particular piece of legislation. So that's what I'm saying. It's really a basic step. If you just take that initiative for the legislation example and apply it, you can very quickly become someone that's absolutely necessary and someone that people can go to and say, hey, that's the home building guy, that's the whatever guy, and have people coming to you for it instead of just, you know, being thrown into matters willy-nilly where you don't really, you know where you're going to end up. And I guess, you know, some of the other examples are in terms of client information or, you know, industry information. You can be that person in your team that sends out really critical information that has changed for an industry or might be super relevant to your client base. And an easy way of doing this is just going on Google and setting up Google alerts for your email. You can literally type in things like, I've got a few examples where it's saying, you know, offshore wind farm industry. So anytime there's a piece of news about the offshore wind farm industry, it gets buzzed to my email. I can browse it, say yes, no, blah, blah, blah. There's been a few times where it's actually a massive deal, or there's a massive piece of legislation that's changing in that industry. And I can go up to someone and say, hey, just flagging this for you. And by doing that, you're the source of contact for that piece of information, right? Legal tech, super, super easy to establish yourself in that, because you don't actually have to be a super innovative person that knows the cutting edge of legal tech, right? You can actually just be the person that figures out how to use existing legal tech in your actual organization. So for the longest time, we had a piece of technology called PDF docs that everyone kind of knew how to use at a basic level, but they're always like, I wish it could do this, or I wish it could produce documents that could do that. I spent half an hour looking through the user manual and then extracting some of the points of that, just saying, hey, by the way, we get this question a lot. This is how you do this. This is how you do this. This is how you do this. And then just by doing that, I became an authority on that particular piece of, you know, technology, but also just broadly, if they have a tech issue, they'd come to me now, which is a blessing and a curse, right? But it just shows how easy it is to actually become an authority in that sort of area as well. It's kind of like if you know, help your mom out with your computer once, and then anytime she has any sort of computer problem, she'll come to you. It's really just establishing itself that way. And I guess the final 2 points that you might want to consider as a starting point for yourselves is, you know, for CPDs, I'm not sure if it's a term internationally, but you know, the ongoing professional development, right? Continuing to professional development. People have to go to webinars and, you know, all sorts of other, you know, write articles, blah, 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 and keep learning to keep their certification in law, essentially. And just being able to, just offering to compile all of those and saying, hey, I knew from now on, if you go to a webinar, I'm happy to, you know, take the recording or take the notes and put it in an online folder for the whole team to refer to. That's something that you can do, and it's super helpful for your team, and it makes you a go-to person in that area. And then the final point of precedence, this is actually something I wouldn't super recommend from the beginning, just because there's entire careers dedicated to doing precedent work for law firms. But as a starting point, you can figure out, you know, the top 4 documents that you use all the time, splice that all together, and then just send it out to your team, build upon it. And again, you're adding a lot of value, and you're the go-to person in that area.
I'd like to add, though, the precedent thing, even though at law firms it may be a dedicated role for someone, in-house, you're often the precedent manager, you're the project coordinator, you're everything. So that, I think that's exactly where you can add value with an in-house role, say, to control precedents, to offer to create precedents, or you know, to circulate comments and whatnot. So that's another, really depends on the area you're in, but a lot of these are great to apply in-house or private practice.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Just to add a point, actually, if it's all right,
Yep.
to the point, I also find that because maybe and I'm speaking more as a trainee, you might not know as much, so sometimes you creating precedents isn't that helpful, but even within because I'm in the UK, with your seat rotations, like I find it's really helpful for the next person coming to your seat to like create a little cheat sheet, because sometimes you come into a seat, you have no idea where anything is, but leaving, you do know. So I don't know, maybe it's just a point of courtesy, but even that makes it easier and helps establish camaraderie within your team, or I've sometimes make summary sheets for some of the partners of how to do stuff, because next time it comes around, well, you know, we can just do it.
Right.
Yeah, and that's definitely helpful. And that's something that, you know, you'll become the go-to person on. They'll know you as the person who was helpful in this area. Anytime they have a question about that sort of thing that you've produced, they'll come to you, right? So yeah, completely agree with that.
And already by doing that, you're creating your personal brand at the firm, right? You're going to be that helpful person. So, that's a great way to take initiative and a great way to build that personal branding within your team and with your colleagues. Great. So just jumping on to the next thing on just talking about the...
Sorry, sorry to really, step in. I just want to know a little bit more about, the president manager thing that you guys talked about. So hi, just for an introduction, I am Bonnie. I'm a corporate lawyer from India, and I work in the infrastructure and energy field. So just wanted to understand, if you can, slightly elaborate upon this issue of president management and how to go about it. Just to I mean, I'm not really able to get that whole idea. So if you can give me an idea, it will be really helpful.
Yeah, that's fine, Bonnie. I think just at a really basic level, if you find that your team is always referring to the same contract or the same deed or whatever you're using, or the same form of article that you're used to writing, even if you put a few of those basic, often referred to documents into a folder, send that link to your team, say, hey, by the way, this is a folder that we can add the stuff that we usually refer to all the time, then that could be something that you add value in. But again, I wouldn't focus on the precedents as maybe your first example, because especially if you're at a large law firm, there's dedicated people doing this. But again, if you're at a smaller firm or your team has team specific precedents, then you might want to consider doing this for your team.
Thank you.
Cool.
That was helpful.
Awesome. So just jumping into, I guess the whole point of this chat also is to encourage everyone here to start networking virtually versus in person. Although it is important, I think virtually is where you can add value right away, and also where you would benefit more than to say like a 65-year-old partner that may not know how to use Zoom, right? So why do people network virtually? I think a main reason is to build a book of business. So if you're in private practice, even as a junior lawyer, if you start to build connections right now, later on when your colleagues become senior associates and partners, they become your go-to book of business, whether that's referring work or also supporting each other. In say when you go in-house, you have private practice friends, they can offer kind of client memos to you or provide you kind of with advice, right? So this is kind of building clientele, but also building a support network for yourself. Another reason why is to exchange ideas. So before COVID, before this online kind of explosion in networking, you would maybe go to your friends. So as Jason was saying, your immediate circle is maybe, for me, someone here in Singapore, right? I may not have connected with someone from Australia unless they live here. So with LinkedIn and with kind of these online platforms, you're able to reach out to Timbuktu, wherever it is, to ask people for their advice or just to exchange ideas. So that's the power of virtually networking. Another reason why is to facilitate mentorship. So I'm sure we've all been in mentorship programs where you throw your name in and you maybe get to select a few mentors that you want, or may not even get to select the mentors that you want. And you're assigned someone that you may click with, but you may not as well. With virtually networking, you're able to kind of choose your own mentors. You're able to go on LinkedIn and say, today I want to connect with senior associates in the construction law industry in Sydney. Very specific, right? But you're able to curate your audience in that sense, curate your mentors. So you're able to kind of get a kind of wide variety of ideas, right? So we also encourage for mentorship, not just seeking out partners, right? Associates, even similar level, even if you're a trainee, find other trainees to be your mentor. No one has to say that a mentor has to be older than you, right? Or even in the same industry. If you're a lawyer, maybe find a mentor. If you want to get into private equity, find a business person in private equity industry that can help mentor you about the industry and lingo, about what to look out for. This is all valuable information that you can get that will contribute to your practice, right? Another reason that you would also network is to pivot into a new industry or at later stage, a new career. So if you're a private practice lawyer, eventually going in-house or want to go in-house, Having a connection of in-house lawyers would be helpful because they can provide you with that advice. They're able to connect you with other in-house lawyers later on. Also, in terms of career, uh, say you do a few years of practice and you decide, I want to go into business instead, right? Having that network already will allow you to pivot into that role because you've built a relationship with these business people. They see how you add value in terms of your personal branding and whatnot. You become a known factor. So I think that's always a plus for being active and building up your personal brand, right? In terms of advantages of a virtual networking platform, you got efficiency. You can see more people in a day. So if you do, say, a 20-minute Zoom call, within, say, 3 hours, you can do at least 6 or 7 or 8, right? So that, once again, beats, say, traveling all the way downtown to have a coffee with someone. That will take you transportation time, and also you're obliged to sit there for an hour at least because you used all that time to get there, right? So there's efficiency in time. Also, breaking down the stereotype, like, once again, talking about, you connect with people in your regular kind of vicinity, but you're able now to connect with people of different backgrounds, different geography, different seniority. So that's a really big benefit. In terms of due diligence, you can actually do research on who you're talking to. So if you're going to a firm event, paired it with a senior associate, you may not know their background. You may not know who they know as well, or what they do, or their interest, right? Whereas if you want to message someone on LinkedIn, you can do your research, find out what clubs they're part of, what organizations are part of, what content they push out, right? And you can have a common ground in engaging with them. So right away, the engagement is a lot more meaningful than to go to a firm event and kind of cold call everyone in the room, right? Easier to connect. Obviously, with LinkedIn, you just click the connect button or click the message button. It just becomes so much easier just to connect with a broad range of people. But also, when you do connect, I would recommend adding a personalized message so it doesn't seem like you're scattergunning everyone that you see on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and just to interject with that, and this might be a little different approach between Daniel and I, right? I rarely send personalized messages, but I see how they work. Essentially, I would just shoot it out, and then if I need to, right, if I actually want to try to have a conversation or try to have a meeting with a person, I would actually just, message them, say, hey, by the way, I've noticed that you've done, had experience in this area. I'm actually really interested in learning blah. Do you mind having a quick chat, or I'd love to pick your brain sometime about this. We'll go into the actual step-by-step of this later, but just saying there's some differences in approach as well. So if you're not comfortable sending, or you don't have the time to send messages with every connection click that you're doing, don't worry too much about it. It is a bit of a stylistic thing. But again, it works better for some people, works less well for other people. It's just flexible.
Exactly. It's all preference at this point.
Hi guys, can I just ask a question? It's Timmy-san here.
Yep.
Would you apply the same thing to other social media platforms? So for example, you see someone on Instagram who works in an area of practice that you are interested in, but that person doesn't have a LinkedIn account. And it's clear from the Instagram that they are a lawyer and they post legal articles on Instagram. Would you apply the same principles of virtual networking to other forms of social media platforms?
Yeah, I'd be a little bit more careful about Instagram and things like that, just because of what the purpose of that platform is. Now, if there are people posting relevant, like law content on Instagram, then I'd say it's fair to reach out to them and try to connect with them that way. If it's just a lawyer posting photos of their family, obviously, it's just a common sense thing, like how you reach out to them. But I think, yeah, I wouldn't say you can't. It just needs to be, you just need to be a little bit more careful that they're open to using the platform in that way.
Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep, completely agree. Great. So just to wrap up here, in terms of advantages of virtual networking, the barrier to entrance is very low. Cost-wise, LinkedIn is free, Zoom is free, Skype is free, right? And then also, we discussed before, time commitment. You can fit a lot more calls in within an hour than to say just doing one coffee, right? Another benefit also of LinkedIn is basically you have an audit record of previous contact. So instead of, say, traditionally you would go to a firm event, pass out business cards, collect business cards, and then you have a stack of them. So if you were diligent, maybe you enter it into an Excel sheet about where you met people, what you talked about, and when you followed up. Those are for the really diligent people. But those that are a bit lazy, like myself, I sometimes forget to input, and then you start to lose track of what you talked about and what personal kind of anecdotes kind of switched, you shared. So with LinkedIn, you're able to kind of build that record by messaging, but also you're able to kind of follow up as well, see when you chatted with them last. It becomes your virtual Rolodex, essentially. And once again, the benefit of also this Rolodex, virtual Rolodex, is that you get to see who else they know. And then you were able to kind of tap into the second network or in the third networks. So that's definitely the power of LinkedIn there. So I guess jumping on to networking through LinkedIn, because once again, that is our preferred medium. Just kind of a very brief note in terms of LinkedIn, your profile. I mean, like, make sure it looks professional, right? When you look at it, it should be an online CV with the profile picture. So whatever you do on your CV, it should reflect accurately on your LinkedIn as well, just because if you do send your application out to a recruiter and they see discrepancies between the two, and guaranteed recruiters will look at your LinkedIn probably before your CV actually. So just make sure they correlate as well. You know, less is more. I think be concise, check your spelling. These are kind of really basic things. Jason, anything on just generally in terms of your profile?
Yeah, I think I just want to emphasize that people do Google you pretty quickly these days. Like I had a screening interview where they literally just started Googling me. I don't think they ever read my CV, but they were like, oh, notice you wrote an article about this, and you know, you did some work and blah. And you know, just having that tidy online platform that would be consistent with my CV is super helpful, because that is actually a first reference point for job searches now as well. And then I guess the other thing is, don't limit yourself into thinking that your LinkedIn or whatever platform you have is an online resume. And what I mean by that is you can see it like pretty much the go-to way of using it is I'm going to list out that I'm a fourth year law student or a recent graduate that did 4 months in blah and blah, 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 blah. But really depends on what your purpose of this is, right? If you're using this and you're trying to use this as a platform to network and not purely job search, to try to learn more things instead of just having people say yes or no to approving you for a job, then you might want to tweak that profile and say, look, I'm really interested in learning about this industry. I've done some work in these areas that made me interested in it. I'd love to reach out to people that are working on these sorts of projects in this sort of industry, in this sort of like country. It's if you're having that sort of targeted approach, and then you reach out to the people that you actually want to connect with, they look at you, they look at that sort of history, it's tailored for that audience that you're trying to connect with. That opens things up a lot more for that discussion, rather than just using it as, hi, I'm law student X in year Y. So yeah, try to also be a little bit flexible with how you're using it, especially if you're not purely targeting jobs at this point.
Right. And that exactly plays to the whole point about personal branding, right? If you're using this as a CV, there's no real brand there. You're just telling it what you are versus why you're doing something or what you're trying to get out of this platform or who you're trying to connect with. All right. So I guess before we dive into this step-by-step thing, we have to caveat that this is what we've been doing and it's worked for us. So there are many ways that you can approach someone, a new contact on LinkedIn or any other medium, right? But this is just something that's worked for us, and like we're just sharing it at this point.
It's also something that's super effective on working to me personally. So I don't know about Daniel, but when people approach me this way, and some of this is actually based on how people have approached me that I'm always responding to. And so just kind of take it in that context as well. I'll let you break it down step by step, Daniel, but I think it's important to kind of frame it that way as well.
Yep, exactly. So I guess jumping to the first step, select your audience. So the benefit here is that with LinkedIn, you can curate your own audience. So if you're today searching for private equity lawyers in London, you type that into LinkedIn search, you get a load of results, right? You can choose who you want to connect with and who sees your content. You can choose your audience based on geography, your industry, seniority level, interests. It's really up to you, right? Once again, it goes to your personal brand. Who do you want your audience to be, and how do you want to brand yourself in front of who? Right?
Yeah, and just a quick point on this. I think the best part of this targeted approach, not just in terms of finding out the particular industry, the particular role, the particular company, is the fact that you can connect more easily with people who aren't the partners, who aren't the directors, who aren't the super senior people. Now it's opening up to connecting to people like Daniel or myself, or if we're reaching out, I'm trying to reach out to people who are maybe 2 years above me, just saying, hey, by the way, I'm about to reach that point in my career, and I like to pick your brain a bit just on these sorts of areas. Having that graded level of seniority and the way that you can target to give you a bit more relevant advice, it is just super helpful as well, because sometimes I can't ask partners things like, what are the working hours really like for you, right? Because they might not know. They're working completely different times, maybe. But if I ask someone who's maybe 2 years above me in that team, they give me more of a realistic approach, and they might have more time or be more willing to actually talk to me than someone who's super senior.
Exactly. So number two in this kind of step-by-step is tailor your messaging, right? So as you were saying on your LinkedIn profile, same thing, right? Tailor your messaging. Be short and concise when you message people. Have a purpose of when you message someone, not just kind of say, hey, I see what you're doing, this is great. That's fine as well. But it means more when you're saying, oh, I'm actually reaching out because you're in an industry that I'm really interested in. I would love to find out more and to pick your brain, right? Once again, there's like a call to action or call to interest there. And also in terms of tailoring your messaging, when you're messaging a recruiter, that would be different than to say messaging someone that you want to have a conversation with about their interest or their practice area, right? So it's okay to have like a template on what you use, but also make sure, like use it on the appropriate person.
Yeah. Sorry, just if we're
Yep.
still on this point, Daniel, I don't think there's like a perfect script for this sort of stuff. But just to give you a bit of an idea of what's been effective for people reaching out to me, where I'm like, oh, great, I definitely want to volunteer my time, like 100%, is when it's literally something like, hey, Jason, I noticed that you're working in construction law in Sydney, right? I'm currently in this field, but I'm really considering transferring over, and I'd just love to have the chance to pick your brain about what it is you do. So you see that's really targeted, it's really specific. It shows me like they've done their research, that I can be useful to them, and I'm way more willing to volunteer my time for that sort of purpose than just the general, hey, what's it like being a lawyer? Because I can probably answer that, but I'm not sure if I'm actually going to end up serving your real purpose, right? If it's not as targeted, or it's not as specific in terms of what you are trying to get out of it from me.
Yep. And I think with a lot of these kind of hard questions, it's more than a message. And if you were to do messaging, it would be a complete essay, right? So I think that brings us to step 3, is the benefit of setting up a video call, is that you're able to kind of dive deeper into these questions that you're asked or you want to ask. And often a question will lead to another question, and that's how you kind of develop rapport. You have conversations like this. So for us, you can use anything. You can use Zoom, you can use Skype, WhatsApp video, it doesn't matter. But choose your medium. And I think generally in terms of timing wise, 20 minutes or less would be all you need. Any more, and like you can basically do a coffee session at that point and do like a full on hour. But Zoom meetings or like video meetings are meant to be kind of quick and dirty. kind of build that initial connection, and eventually, number 4 is to either during that call or even afterwards, after a few more interactions, to set up periodic check-ins. So that could be, say, like I spoke to Jason, and Jason's takeaway is that, you know what, I'm going to go back and implement these steps and connect with 2 people, right? And if it's okay for me to check in after, I don't know, like a few months, and I'll let you know how it goes, kind of thing, right? You just create an opportunity for you to touch base again with the person that you spoke to. It could be also in terms of major events. So if you just got a job, you can reach out and say, hey, Jason, just want to let you know, it's been a while, but I just got a new job at UBS. Love to chat sometime, right? Just creating opportunities, once again, about multiple touch points, right, in someone's life, engagements.
Yeah, and I think just really quickly, right? It's sometimes a bit intimidating, or you might feel like you're asking for too much if you try to set up a video call on the first interaction, and that's fair. I think what helps set that up is if you do ask that question in the first place and just say, hey, by the way, I've asked, like, whatever, I'd love to know more about this. They write a reply, and then you kind of say, oh, well, that's super helpful. Look, I've got some other questions about this particular area, but I don't want to end up in like this text battle, right? Would you mind if we have a 20-minute call or a 30-minute call about whatever? So, and then come prepared with specific questions about that. I think at least I'm way more receptive to doing that rather than just typing out lots of texts and typing out lots of answers. It might not be, and it might not actually be 20 minutes. If we actually got into a proper conversation, I've extended it many times where, I want to make sure you guys are getting what you came here and came into contact with me for. So I'm happy to go over that time. But again, if you're just, limiting it from a very approachable 20 minutes in the beginning, it grows from there. And again, yes, super, super appreciate all the people that do follow up on what we actually say, whether it's worked out or not. If I've, the hardest times is when we've given advice to people and they just take it away and we never hear from them again. It's like, well, I don't know if I actually helped you or not. And I'm really happy to, when you come back and say, hey, it worked out, or hey, it didn't work out because blah. And then I'm way more willing to keep talking to you, have a proper connection instead of a one-off advice session. So that's kind of all I wanted to chip in on this matter. Just, very recently being on the other end of this, that's how it kind of feels.
Exactly. And even as a takeaway after the session, if everyone kind of went off and secured a new contact, connected with someone new, and you came back and tell us, hey, step 1 and 2 worked, step 3 didn't work, right? But I still connected with someone. That for us, it's like, great. So we can kind of roll this out for more people, right? So yeah, feedback is so important for us. And I'm aware of time, so I'll kind of go through this really quickly. The last kind of way, like aside from personal branding and branding yourself, is there are many ways for you to contribute to the legal space. So find one that aligns with your personal brand. So whether that's creating a YouTube page, or a nonprofit, a blog, a LinkedIn page, a Reddit thread, it depends on how much how much comfort you feel in doing one of these kind of outlets, right? And I mean, the benefit of contributing to a platform or creating a platform is business development, right? You can also get a job through it, advertise that you're a co-founder or whatnot. It does look impressive for trainee applications. A creative outlet. So I think for Jason and I, we do this, outside of our 9-to-5. So it allows us to kind of use this other creative side of our brain versus reviewing contracts all day, right? A main point of platforms is collaboration, and collaboration, also creating community. On the right side, you can see how you can actually get involved as a co-founder, ambassador, content creator, guest contributor. The whole point is that there are differing magnitudes of how you can get involved. So if you do feel inclined to create content and you're hyper creative, go for it, right? But if you say, you know what, I want to ease into it, I want to maybe start off with articles or help a platform interview guests, that could be your way in as well. That could be your way to brand yourself, right? There's no sure way of doing this. It's just platforms are a great way to collaborate and to join a community, create a community, however you will.
Yeah, and I think this kind of ties into the questions that were mentioned in the beginning, right? Like, if you are into content creation or you want to start posting on LinkedIn and you're worried that what you say might not be right, it might be scrutinized, blah, 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 those are perfectly fair feelings. I feel that all the time. But I think there's a real power in being a junior lawyer and just expressing things as part of your learning cycle and as part of your opinions right now, where I can say, look, I've read this thing and my takeaways are blah, blah, blah. Not sure if this is completely right, so would love to hear some opinions, but this is what I'm thinking right now. And you might get some people who are just like, oh, actually it's wrong because blah, but at least you're learning that way. And no one's going to be like, no, you're wrong and you should feel bad. Or if they do, they're the ones in the wrong. So, you know, if you're expressing things, firstly, as an opinion, secondly, as something that you're learning, and as something that you're interested in, then that just gives you all this license to go on and post on basically anything you want. And I guess, yeah, how do you make relevant content for a practice area or field? It might be pretty intimidating to go out and write a full article or write a full post on LinkedIn about something that's in a legal field that you want to start being known for. I would say, as a baby step to this, go online and see what sort of things are being written, and then just try to add a comment on top of it. So, you know, if you've read a whole article and you want to post something, you can say, yeah, these are my takeaways from it. I think that this was interesting because blah. That's like something I learned from it was blah. Then that's something that you're adding value on, and you're summarizing it for people who might not have been able to read that article. And it also opens up a discussion with the author to, you know, teach you some more, or at least they'll be like, oh, great, someone's actually reading my stuff. Because you don't, you know, you throw it into the black hole and you never hear from it again sometimes. So yeah, take advantage of those baby steps, take advantage of where you are in your learning and development right now. And seriously, if you come in with the attitude of, I'm just learning, I'm just trying to figure things out, and this is my opinion, you're going to open yourself up to content creation in whatever you want.
Right. And I think even like a further step back, and even babier step is, instead of, if you don't have an opinion on something, but you're curious about it, ask a question, right? Someone posts something about construction law, I can actually say, hey, so what do you feel about this? How do you feel about whatever it is? Like, you can always ask questions, and it doesn't come off that you don't know anything. It just comes off you're curious, right? So that's another way to easily insert yourself into a conversation, or to start building your kind of brand that way.
Yeah, asking questions after seeing a piece of content in the comments, just being like, hey, by the way, author, what do you think about this? Super, super easy. Gets the ball rolling. You can leverage that into having that Zoom call in the end, right? Just, hey, that was super interesting. I'd love to discuss it with you a bit more because this is a field that I'm really interested in, blah, blah, blah. So you can see like it's all building, right? So hopefully that makes it a bit less intimidating. Hopefully that answered those two questions at the beginning.
Yep. And just really briefly, in terms of whatever your method, just focus your attention on the creation and promotion of your content. Creation, consistency, collaboration, draw inspirations from other industries. Like we were saying, it doesn't have to be the legal industry, right? And also be visual. We're all visual creatures, so whatever your posts are, try videos, try images and whatnot. And promotion-wise, engagement, right? Engagement with your viewership, draw on sponsorship from your firms, collaborating with other organizations, and promoting on different mediums. So if you're versed in Instagram, go for it, right? If you want to create YouTube videos, but also TikTok videos, sure, whatever works for you, right?
Yeah, and just the final point on this before Daniel points to that last slide is just, try to, it's really easy if you start off with creating the sort of material that you personally find really interesting, right? So I think a lot of people find LinkedIn kind of useless or kind of like not worth the time, because they see it as a platform where the content on it is like, hey, I just got a new job, or hey, very proud to work on this deal with blah, blah, blah. And like, just personally, I don't really care about that sort of stuff. And that's not what I write about. Whereas if I see people writing, you know, step-by-step guides on things, I'm always like, that's great, I can use that. So a natural starting point for me in creating content is, how do you do step-by-step guides for things that I've learned? So again, just think about what sort of things you find helpful to you, and then you can kind of channel the same sort of thing. It's just more natural and a bit more authentic that way.
Yep, exactly. And a few examples of some platforms out there, podcasts and whatnot. The whole point is get involved and collaborate. Easiest way to build your brand outside of your own personal brand is to get involved with the platform. Great. I think that went over a little bit, but does anyone have any questions? I hope we answered the first two questions, but if not, let us know.
Hey, just one question. You guys mentioned that the LinkedIn profile should be similar to your CV. But just to understand the point, say if I worked on certain matters which are very which I'm not sure would be which can be put out, say, in the public domain. Would it make sense if I can keep things specific in my CV, but give a general overview on certain things in my LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. Sorry, just before we jump into this particular question and the rest of the Q&A, if you find this helpful, if you found this presentation helpful, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn and just share your thoughts, or, if it doesn't work out for you, please give feedback. We always appreciate that. I think that was a common theme through the whole thing. But yeah, just diving into this Q&A, right? I think that if you're a bit worried about potentially going into that confidential or, frowned upon area of what you can disclose on matters that you're working on, try to anonymize it, right? So, for example, I might say something like, worked on the contractor side of a major road project in New South Wales, which involved blah, blah, blah. Just by taking all of that out and having, the essence of it, that could be enough to get your point through. And then the other thing is, if in doubt, feel free to check with the supervisor that you're working on this for. Just say, hey, by the way, I've learned a lot from this deal. I'm trying to, create a bit of content that, shows that I'm learning about this sort of thing. Do you think I can disclose this deal, or should I wait? Or, just let me know if this kind of crosses a line. Even asking that question will remove some of the doubt. They might say no. You might want to run it by them. But again, just, if you're stripping it out so that I can't even identify who the client is and what the project is, but I know that it's a major whatever, then that should be enough in like 95% of cases. You think that's right, Daniel?
I think that's right. And I think before you post these kind of deals, make sure that's the kind of image you want to give out, right? Like it doesn't have to be an exact replication of your CV or your deal list. But if you say you want to get into, I keep using construction law as an example, but if you want to showcase that you're interested in construction law and you're posting construction law deals, that makes sense, right? But if you're just posting every deal that you've done, it really doesn't create much of a brand, versus it just looks more of what you've done versus why you're doing something, right?
Thanks, that was helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Let's just read through some of these questions. If personal branding is good or bad for the firm that I will be working for, do I build my personal brand for myself alone or run alongside with the firm presence? I think that, okay, that's a really good question. And that's something that I personally worried about a bit as well. That's why you'll see some people with their LinkedIn profiles write like, all opinions are my own. But I think it's, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm answering this question properly. I think it's always good to know what your firm's position is on certain things. And what I mean by that is just kind of understand from a marketing point of view who you're representing and what you're trying to get out of it, right? So for example, and I'm always dragging this back to construction law, but you know, my firm, Pinson Masons in Australia, we work for contractors instead of government. So our whole message is we help contractors out, which is a completely different, you know, risk profile to what we're doing with government. So in my writing, if I'm writing for similar firm material, I would be trying to push a contractor's point of view. My projects would be from a contractor's point of view. This is, I would be saying things for the advantage of contractors instead of saying how government is being screwed by contractors, right? Like, not that it's true, but that would be the difference, that I wouldn't be, you know, I would be trying to align myself with that sort of thing. So hopefully that answers your question, but I think it's just, you know, get an understanding of what your firm and what your team is trying to get out there into the market, and then let that guide your content as well. Because, and you'll find that a lot of the work you do does align with it. So yeah, just having a clear understanding from the beginning is super helpful.
There's one from Liberty, right?
Yeah, you want to take this one, Daniel? I read slow.
When this connects. Yeah, so I think it always helps to ask outright. So obviously, like when you engage with someone, don't ask right away. Build that rapport first to kind of, it's like an interview, right? You want to make sure that this person is right for you in terms of being a mentor or a mentee. But I've had many instances where people kind of say, oh, you know what, we've had a really great chat. I would love to stay in touch with you. How do you feel about a mentorship relationship, right? And I always say yes, just because I love to mentor. But I think it's always good to ask just to set that expectation, because otherwise if you don't and you message your quote unquote mentor in a month's time and another month's time, they may be like, whoa, why is this guy so needy, right? But if you kind of make that out like, hey, you know, do you mind if I kind of touch base with you at certain points in time to keep this relationship going? But otherwise, if you're busy, let me know, right? It's a respect for the other person's time, but also you respect the boundaries as well of a mentorship relationship.
Yeah, and I would just say you don't have to think about this as like a super formal, I need to get it in writing sort of thing in terms of mentorship, right? And there's many times where it does come naturally. You know, if I'm having a chat with people, I don't need to be called a mentor, or I don't necessarily call people a mentor for that to have that to be the relationship. But you know, over time, if I've asked quite a few questions, they've given me some answers to those questions, and I've actually learned things from it. I could follow up and just be like, hey, by the way, I've applied all this advice, blah, blah, blah. Really appreciate it. Look, I honestly think of you as a mentor, so I'd love to keep having a chats with you about this sort of thing. If you're free, then even having it kind of thrown in that way, instead of saying, hey, by the way, will you be my mentor, yes or no, is perfectly acceptable. So don't think of it as a massive hurdle. It just kind of develops naturally as well. So, you know, if I've engaged with Daniel all the time and he's done his Zoom call with me and I've applied the advice and I've gone through and said, yes, it's worked for me, I would follow up and I would, yeah, try to throw it in there. But if that's actually how you feel, but yeah, just throw it in there.
Awesome. I think that answers Sarah's question. Don't overthink it, basically.
Yeah,
Annie's
Liberty's question.
Yep, Annie's
Sorry.
question. Personal branding requires.
Sorry.
Oh, there's another one.
Yeah, I think we did Liberty's question, and now it's Sarah's question. How to act in a video meeting with a new mentor for the first time? Like, what kind of questions should one ask, and how not to overwhelm them? Can I take this one, Daniel?
Yeah.
Okay, just because I struggle with very, very broad questions. So I'm always a fan of asking specific questions, right? So if you're asking things like, how do you know, what are your hours like? That might be a very basic question that you might not want to ask, but yeah, like, what are your hours like? Or, you know, what sort of projects have you worked on? Or what is like, what sort of work do you do in a day, right? Then that's something that's specific and I can answer. If it's a very broad question, I always struggle answering it. So, an example would be like, how do you find the law? Or like, do you think being a lawyer is worth it? And I'm like, oh, it's really, it's super broad. I'm not sure if I'm able to invest that much time in trying to explore my own feelings. I don't usually want to, but you know, just that sort of approach. If you're asking specific questions, it's always easier to answer, and you can lead it into those broader, bigger conceptual questions later. But if you come in prepared and say, look, these are the 4 things that I'm really curious about, then that's always a good start to building a relationship and building further conversations down the line.
Right. I would also add to broad questions are not ideal because you can go off on tangents and may not get what you exactly want. But you're able, you know, if you're going to ask something like that, it'd be nice to say, if I say, hey, Jason, can you tell me what the hours are like for a corporate lawyer? From my research and from talking to other people, they've been telling me this. Is this true? Right. So that's where you can kind of bring your kind of broad question down to what you're trying to look for out of that question. Right.
Yeah, so it's 2 things. Like with asking specific questions, it's easier for them to answer, and you're more likely to actually get the information that you want out of it. And yeah, just make sure that you don't try to overwhelm people with those big questions from the first meeting.
Yep.
Cool. And now I think we're up to Annie's question. Personal branding requires close management, aka consistency. How do you pick it back up if you want to go quiet for a while to focus, for example, LPC? Or what are your tips in scheduling time to produce content if you're about to go into a busy timetable? Yeah, do you want to touch on this question of consistency, Daniel?
Yeah, sure. In terms of like, we all get busy at sometimes, right? So I think for me, even I get content fatigue. Some weeks I'm just like, I have nothing. Like I'm so tired from work. I don't know what else to put out there. So I think consistency is in terms of quality, right? If you know you're not going to push out good quality, don't force it. Less is more at this point, right? So just make sure consistency is in terms of quality. And if you really do want to continue to produce content and good content, I think treat it like a part-time job. Schedule some time, right? Whether that's Saturday morning from 9 to 10, spend some time bashing out one LinkedIn post a week, right? But it's a quality post that you do. Do that, right? I think in previous chat, I talked about using programs like buffer.com, where you can kind of set your posts so that you're not thinking on the fly on a Tuesday morning on what you're posting. You can on the Saturday morning type out your post, your content already, right? Treat it like a part-time job basically, and just make sure the content is quality.
Yeah, and I think if it helps, you can break it up. Like you don't have to, and this is probably where you get sidetracked and it's busy and you lose focus and you lose time, is when you try to do too big of a project in the beginning or too big of a piece of content in the beginning. And you're like, I can't do this 1,000 word article because things have happened during the week. Just try to break it up saying, look, these are the 5 points I'm going to be really making in this article. So I'm going to flesh out point 1 and release it as a post or whatever, smaller piece of content. Then I'm going to do point 2. That just breaking it up into chunks will really help you, actually send things out the door. And also take the baby steps, right? Just literally write a comment, or you can say, today I'm just going to write a comment on blah because I'm too busy. That's something that you're doing. That's you're building up, you're still keeping to consistency. You're still doing something. It might be smaller than you initially imagined, but it still builds the overall presence that you're trying to go for. So yeah, I'd say those are probably the main tips that I try to push out. Cool. What are we up to? Ryan's question. Is it proper to engage finance professionals as a law student if I am looking to gain insights in, for example, capital markets or PE? Well, you have a finance background, Daniel, so.
I work in the industry. I'm not finance at all. So I can take this briefly. So, I think with any engagement that you do, see what your end goal is, right? If you're connecting with someone to gain insight, that's a great takeaway. And I think not many people will reject you, right? If you're just curious about what they do, curious about them, curious about their career, a lot of people like to talk about their careers and to introduce you to what they do. So as long as you're coming into this connection genuinely, I think there's no problem with that. Whether you're a law student or a high school student, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I would say, again, kind of going back to the step-by-step thing that we talked about, one of the more important things would be tailoring your message and tailoring, your online presence of what you're trying to get out of it, right? So your initial message might be, hey, I'm a law student that's learning this sort of area of law, but I'd love to see what you think from actually working in the industry, because my approach is obviously different. Then that's a really good opening. If your profile is saying, I'm looking for roles in this sort of industry, but I also love to take a practical approach and really understand what it's like working on the ground so that I can develop my career as a lawyer servicing this industry, just as an example, then that's something that you're tailoring your message for. People look at it and say, oh, this is what they want out of it. This is something that I can add value in. This is something that we could actually both benefit from when we have this chat. So I think in that context, the tailoring the message, tailoring your profile, trying to reach out to those particular people, particularly the lower seniority people, would be super, super helpful. And this question from Harriet: how do I build my brand with clients as a junior lawyer, especially when partners and senior lawyers usually take the reins and have direct contact with the client? I think this is a really good question and a really big topic, but I'll try to answer it really quickly. I think there's a bit of a misconception, and chip in if you disagree, Daniel, but I think there's a bit of a misconception that you have to reach the CEO, or you have to reach the director or the super senior person on the matters that you're working with to develop a client or develop client relationships. I think you need to grow with your audience and grow with your clients. And what I mean by that is just think about how fluid the legal industry is in terms of people working in private practice moving in-house, or people in in-house roles changing all the time. The junior project manager that I might be working with, where in 10 years time when I'm trying to push for partner or whatever, they'll probably be a senior person in the industry, and they'll probably become a decision maker when I need to be with a decision maker. So I think as a first step, try to reach out with your counterpart on matters, so the junior person on the matter, and try to establish a relationship just by being super helpful, always being in contact, ask them about their day, blah, blah, blah. Just try to target them instead of the partner equivalent on the client side. And then the other thing, and I'd love to see this more in the legal industry, especially in private law firms, is everyone being a lot more helpful to each other in your peer group, or mentoring the people who are maybe a year or two below you, just being super helpful to those people in your groups instead of taking the, oh, we got to compete for limited spots, blah, blah, blah. Because over time, they're the people who are going to move in-house. They're the people who are going to look back and think, oh, did this person really help me when I was still developing as a young lawyer, and was always willing to give their time and always willing to actually provide value to me and take me under their wing, or share notes or whatever. It just leaves a really good impression when you're growing up that way. And you'll find that when the time is right and you're developing your career, they're developing their career, that's when those connections become super valuable, because you've started growing them from the ground up instead of straight away looking for the top of the tree, looking for the directors, CEOs, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's way more approachable than the initial contacting clients, blah, blah, blah. So hopefully that helps, Harriet. And Daniel, I know I've just ranted for a long time because it's a massive thing for me. But yeah, anything else as well?
Yeah, just very briefly, I think in terms of building your brands with clients, distinguishing between existing clients and new clients. If you're trying to build your brand with existing clients, know your value proposition at that point as a junior lawyer. You're the guy that does the work, right? So, you're not going to be the guy that's whining and dining and going for coffees and this and that. That's not where your value lies as a junior lawyer. Do good work and you'll be recognized for it, right? But in terms of if you do want to go for the coffee sessions and whatnot, building your brand with new clients is where you should focus your efforts, right? I mean, if the partner has a relationship with this company, there's nothing you can do that will supplement that, right? Or make it better or worse. It's up to that partner. But if you create a new relationship with clients, that's where you have control over your book of business and over how your brand is kind of viewed. And as Jason was saying, when you build these relationships right away with a startup, later on they become a Fortune 500 company, right? And you know the CEO directly. Um, that's where you should focus your efforts if you really want to try to build your own book and create your own unique brand. But when you're working with a partner on an established client, know where your value is, and that's doing the work and doing it right and doing it well.
Yeah, and I think just really quickly on this as well. So that would all kind of go towards the networking approach, right? Where you're reaching out to people and trying to reach out to those new clients or those existing clients and being like, let's establish a connection that way. The other part of personal branding is when you're getting those inbound leads where people look at you or people look at me and say, oh, he's a construction lawyer. I might need a construction lawyer, so I might contact this guy. Getting those inbound leads, again, is about targeting your message, really tailoring your message. So think about it. If you're trying to target a recruiter to look at your profile and your personal brand properly and favorably, then you might list things like your CV, or you might list things like associate at blah, blah, blah. If you're trying to target clients, think about what clients are looking for, right? So they're not looking for, or they're not typing into Google or whatever for associate at whatever. They're looking for things really basically like construction lawyer working on road projects, because that's what they're working on. So think about what they're actually searching for in terms of how you position yourself in what you write as your profile. Again, different purposes, different targets, different messages, but I'd probably suggest tailoring it a bit more. Hope that helped.
All right, I think it brings us to the end. This is one of our longer webinars.
Cool, thanks guys. And again, feel free to reach out if something's worked, something's not worked, what sort of content you guys would actually like to see in future. We're always looking for good ideas. And yeah, really we're here to serve you. So feel free to use us.
All right, thanks everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.